Hello, my friends. Welcome back. Like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. I didn't even want to buy a house. That's the part that still sticks with me. I wasn't ready, not financially, not mentally, not emotionally. But when you've spent 10 years in a cramped apartment with neighbors who scream at each other through the walls and stomp around like wrestling champions, the idea of owning a quiet place of your own feels like salvation. The house on Maple Crest Drive was the first one I toured. A pale blue ranch-style home with white trim, a wide front porch, and a freshly cut lawn that didn't fit the price tag. The agent, a chipper woman named Stacy, said the sellers wanted to move quickly. I should have asked why, but I was tired of apartment noise, tired of my life feeling stuck. And the house felt peaceful when I walked in. The air was cool. The hardwood floors were smooth and clean. The living room had a big window that flooded the place with sunlight. It felt safe, friendly. I signed the papers that same week. 3 days after moving in, I started noticing the house wasn't quiet at all. The first night was uneventful, though I remember waking up several times like someone had tapped my shoulder. The second night, I heard what I thought was the fridge making a strange sound, a hum followed by a short dragging noise. By the third night, the dragging grew longer, slower, almost thoughtful. I walked into the kitchen and saw nothing out of place. But the noise wasn't coming from the fridge. It was coming from the hallway, the long hallway connecting the bedrooms to the living room. The hallway was narrow and always darker than the rest of the house, even during the day. A place that seemed to swallow light instead of reflect it. I stood at one end of it and stared. Something shifted in the dark. I flicked the switch on, illuminating the wooden floor and beige walls. Nothing was there. I told myself it was settling noises. Old houses breathe, expand, contract. But the dragging didn't sound like a house breathing. It sounded like someone pulling their feet. The next morning, while unpacking, I found something odd in the hallway closet. It was a small patch of discolored drywall, low to the ground, maybe 2 feet up. I ran my fingers over it. The texture was slightly rougher, like it had been replaced or painted over in a hurry. Behind it, something tapped once. I jerked my hand back and stared at the drywall. My pulse sped up, and for a moment I felt stupid, standing there like a kid who expected a monster to jump out. But then the logical part of my brain reminded me that houses make all kinds of internal noises, pipes, framing, electrical wiring. Just because the tap lined up perfectly under my fingers didn't mean anything. Still, I closed the closet door. Over the next week, I caught myself avoiding the hallway altogether. I'd walk fast through it or take the long route through the kitchen just to get to my bedroom. At night, I kept my door closed, even though I'd never slept with it closed before. Something about that hallway made me feel exposed, like someone was standing just out of view. One night, around 2:40 a.m., a noise woke me. A voice. A whisper so faint I first thought it came from a dream. I lay still, listening. The whisper came again, drifting through the air. Soft, slow. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone trying to get my attention. I sat up. The whispering stopped instantly. My room was silent, but the air felt heavy. Even the shadows seemed thicker, as if they'd shifted when I moved. I got up, opened my door a crack, and peered into the hallway. Pitch black. The whisper came again, not from the hallway, from behind me. I spun around. Nothing was there. My throat tightened. I flipped on the bedroom light. The whisper stopped immediately. The silence afterward was so complete, it felt like someone had pressed their face against mine and held their breath. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I called my mom. She told me to sage the house. My best friend told me to get a carbon monoxide detector. I bought the detector. It read normal levels. That same day, my next-door neighbor stopped me while I was taking out the trash. His name was Ron, an older guy with sunspots on his arms and a permanent squint that made him look suspicious of everything. "You're new," he said. "Yeah, I moved in last week. He nodded, his eyes drifting toward my house. Everything all right in there? It was the way he asked it, hesitant, cautious, that made me tense. Why wouldn't it be? He stared a little too long before answering. No reason, just, folks don't stay there long. My chest tightened. Why? Is there something wrong with the house? Not the house, he said. Something in it. Before I could ask what he meant, his wife called him from their porch, and he gave me a half-hearted wave before walking away. The next night, the dragging sound returned. This time, it was unmistakably coming from the hallway. I opened my bedroom door slowly, heart pounding. The sound paused as though it heard me, then continued. My breath hitched. Someone was dragging their feet down the hallway. I whispered to myself, "You are hearing things. You are stressed." But that lie disintegrated when I saw the floorboards bend, just slightly, one by one. As if someone heavy was walking toward my room, I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it. The dragging stopped right on the other side. Silence settled, the kind of silence that hums in your ears and crawls under your skin. Then the doorknob turned, slowly, deliberately. I staggered back. My lungs struggled to expand. The knob turned again, harder this time, then stopped. I didn't breathe for what felt like an entire minute. Finally, I reached for my phone, ready to call 911, when something strange happened. The house went still. Completely still. Like whatever was outside my door had stepped away. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. The floorboards were quiet. The air was no longer cold. I told myself I imagined it. I told myself stress could induce hallucinations. I told myself anything that would let me sleep again. But the house knew better. A few days later, I decided to repaint the hallway. I wanted to make it brighter, less suffocating. As I moved furniture, I noticed something odd about the baseboards. A long scratch mark ran down one side, thin but deep, like a nail or knife had dragged across it. I crouched down and ran my finger over it. The drywall patch behind me tapped again. I jerked upright. The tap came a second time, a little louder. With shaking hands, I grabbed a screwdriver and began prying the drywall patch open. The plaster cracked. A piece crumbled inward. Behind the wall was a narrow cavity, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze into. My stomach lurched. I held my phone inside the hole and turned on the flashlight. What I saw made me freeze. Scratch marks covered the inside walls, thousands of them, layer over layer, some deep enough to pull chunks of plaster free. At the bottom of the cavity sat a small object, a single, dirty house key. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering so hard I felt it in my teeth. That night, the whispering didn't wait for 2:40 a.m. It started the moment I turned off the light. A soft murmur circling my bed, slipping beneath my blanket of logic and denial. The voice was closer now, too close. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the whisper crawled under my skin like it had been waiting for me to listen. I snapped on the lamp. The whisper stopped. I kept the lamp on until morning. The next day, I drove to the county office, determined to find out who lived in the house before me. The clerk looked up the records and told me something that made my stomach drop. The house had changed owners 8 times in 13 years. That wasn't normal. I asked if anyone had died there. He hesitated, then nodded. One. A man. About 6 years ago. What happened to him? He lowered his voice. He locked himself in one of the interior walls. They said he became confused, delusional. I felt the blood drain from my face. Locked himself inside? How? They found scratch marks, like he'd been trying to get out. My hands trembled. Do you know where in the house? He checked the file. A hallway cavity, next to a closet. I left without saying thank you. When I got home, the house felt wrong, off, like someone had been inside while I was gone. The air was colder. My bedroom door was open, even though I had closed it. The drywall cavity looked wider, as if someone had tugged at the plaster. I tried to convince myself to leave, pack a bag, and stay in a hotel. But exhaustion weighed down my limbs. I sat on the edge of my bed just to breathe. The whisper came immediately. Only this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a voice, a man's voice, clear, close, right beside my ear. "Let me out!" I screamed and fell off the bed. The voice grew louder, angrier. The walls shook. Books fell off shelves. My bedroom door slammed shut on its own. The voice roared through the room. "Let me out!" The drywall by the closet split open, and a hand reached through, pale, thin, fingernails torn. Blood dried into the creases of the skin. The hand clawed at the air like it was searching for me. I scrambled back, hitting the opposite wall. The cavity tore wider. A face appeared, sunken eyes, lips cracked, skin stretched tight over bone. It wasn't fully human anymore, not after whatever had happened inside those walls. It stared straight at me with a desperation so thick it tasted like metal in the air. "Let me out," it repeated, voice breaking. I bolted for the window, unlocked it, and climbed out onto the lawn. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I drove straight to my brother's house and stayed there for a week. When I finally worked up the courage to return with police and a contractor, the cavity in the wall was empty. No scratches, no key, no hand. Just smooth drywall, like nothing ever happened. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. The house sold again 3 months later. I didn't warn the new owners. Maybe I should have, but I don't think it would have mattered. Some houses aren't haunted. Some houses are hungry. And Maple Crest Drive has been hungry for a long, long time. I had been driving for hours through the back roads of Vermont, snow piling up on my windshield wipers, the world outside reduced to an endless white blur. I was heading to a small cabin I had rented for the winter, just me, the mountains, and the promise of solitude. I thought it would be peaceful, a chance to escape the chaos of city life. I didn't know that peace can be a lie and solitude can be a trap. The cabin was even more remote than the listing suggested. There were no neighbors for miles, and the road leading up to it was barely maintained, already slick with ice. When I finally arrived, the place looked abandoned but solid. Stone chimney, thick wooden beams, a fireplace that smelled faintly of soot and pine. The snow outside was pristine, untouched except for the tracks leading to the front door. I assumed the previous caretaker had been there recently. The first night was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every little sound. The wind rattled the shutters, and occasionally a tree branch would scrape against the roof. I slept with the fire crackling, imagining the snow outside insulating me from the world. But when I woke at 3 a.m, something was wrong. The snow outside the window had been disturbed. Footprints led from the tree line to the cabin's porch. They were long, narrow, almost human, but not quite. The spacing was uneven, the impressions too deep in some places, too shallow in others. I stared at them, frozen, heart pounding, before convincing myself it had to be a deer or a large animal. Over the next few days, odd things began to happen. I would put objects down in one place and find them elsewhere. Chairs slightly turned, books open to random pages, small scratches on the wooden floor. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. I was alone, tired from driving and clearing snow. But the feeling of being watched grew heavier with each passing day. I could sense eyes on me, even when no one was there. By the 5th night, the storm hit in full force. Snow whipped against the cabin, and the wind howled like it was alive. I stayed near the fireplace, but the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, reaching toward me. Around midnight, I heard movement outside, footsteps crunching in the deep snow. I grabbed a flashlight and went to the window, shining it into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing. Then, a shadow moved at the tree line. Too tall, too thin to be human. It swayed slightly, almost like it was gliding over the snow. I blinked, and it was gone. The next morning, I saw the tracks again. They had multiplied, circling the cabin, forming patterns in the snow I didn't understand. Loops, spirals, lines intersecting at impossible angles. They led nowhere and everywhere at once, as if whatever was making them had no need to leave. I felt a rising panic, realizing that I was being observed by something that had been learning me for days. On the seventh night, the presence made itself more obvious. I woke to the feeling of someone, or something, standing just outside the bedroom door. I froze, holding my breath. The air in the cabin had grown colder, thick, pressing down on my chest. I dared not move. My flashlight lay on the floor where I had left it on the dresser. I reached for it slowly, and when I turned it on, the beam caught something at the edge of the hall. A tall, thin figure, faceless, gliding slightly above the floor. I screamed and it vanished. Sleep became impossible. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind felt like movement outside. Shadows danced where none should be. I barricaded the doors and windows, but it didn't matter. Whatever was out there didn't need doors or windows to get in. I began talking to it, pleading, threatening, promising to leave if it would only let me be. It never responded. I knew it could hear me. I knew it was learning me. I tried to leave on the 10th day. I dug my truck out of the snow and tried to start it, but the battery was dead. I checked the cell signal. None. The storm had cut me off completely. I was trapped in the snow with something patient, something watching, something that didn't follow the rules of this world. That night, I saw more figures outside the cabin, 5 of them, maybe more, gliding over the snow in silence. They didn't make footprints. Their forms were featureless, impossibly thin, swaying slightly in unison. I tried to record them on my phone, but the screen went black whenever I pointed it at them. I couldn't escape, couldn't hide. The air seemed heavier, thicker, like the cold had weight. By the 12th night, I was beyond terrified. I barricaded the doors and windows, sitting in the corner of the living room with a fireplace poker in hand. I whispered to them, begged them, told them I would leave if they let me. Nothing. Then I noticed prints inside the cabin, wet and slushy, leading from the back hallway to the living room, then stopping halfway. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't rationalize it. The isolation was no longer peaceful. It was a prison. I finally managed to start the truck the next morning. I drove down the mountain road as fast as I could, snow crunching under the tires. I didn't look back, but I felt it. The presence in the snow, patient and watching. Even now, weeks later, I feel it when the wind whistles through the trees or when snow falls silently outside. Then came the letter. No return address. Inside was a photograph of the cabin at night, windows glowing faintly, snow stretching around it. And in the snow, I could see the figures, tall, thin, faceless, swaying in unison. At the bottom of the photograph, scrawled in jagged black ink, were the words, "We never left." I haven't returned to the mountains. I avoid snow, forests, and isolation whenever possible. But every winter, when the nights grow long and the wind bites at my skin, I feel them again. I know they are out there, waiting. Winter is no longer silent. It watches, it waits, and it does not forgive those who wander alone. I was never one for superstition. I grew up in the hills of West Virginia, surrounded by forests and abandoned mines, but I never paid attention to the old tales. Ghosts, spirits, creatures that waited in the hollers, they were stories to scare kids. That all changed the day I took the wrong turn. I was driving a borrowed truck on my way to photograph an abandoned logging site deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Mason, my friend and guide, had given me vague directions and a map scribbled on the back of a receipt. I followed the roads he pointed out, twisting through hills and valleys until the pavement ended and a narrow dirt path disappeared into the trees. "Take it," Mason had said. "You'll see the old cabins. Nobody goes that far." The path was rough. My truck bounced over hidden roots and rocks. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. Not the natural quiet of the forest, the oppressive, unnatural quiet. No birds, no insects, not even wind in the trees. just silence. After what felt like hours, I reached a clearing. A small cabin sat at the center, its roof partially collapsed, paint flaking. Smoke rose from a crooked chimney. The sight should have been comforting, a sign of life. But something in the air made me freeze. The smell was metallic, like iron, mixed with the earthy scent of decay. I stepped closer. Footprints in the mud surrounded the cabin, elongated, thin, uneven. I couldn't make sense of them. They weren't human, and they weren't animal. I called out. "Hello?" My voice echoed strangely, swallowed almost immediately by the forest. No answer. I noticed a shadow move across the porch. An old man sat in a rocking chair, motionless, staring at me. His eyes were hollow, his skin stretched tight over his face. He didn't speak, just watched. My instincts screamed at me to leave. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice a dry rasp. "Not after dark, not alone." I'm just passing through," I said. My voice sounded small, pathetic. "I'm here to take pictures of the cabins." He shook his head slowly. "Cabins don't want their stories told." I didn't understand, but I ignored the warning. I moved toward the cabin. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Dust coated the floorboards. Old furniture leaned against the walls, but it was the fireplace that caught my attention. Ashes blackened, recent. Someone had been here, very recently. That's when I heard it. A whisper, so soft I thought I imagined it. Then another, closer this time. My name, my own voice, calling me from the shadows. I spun around, heart racing. Nothing. The old man didn't move, didn't react. He simply said, "They're learning." Before I could ask who, something shifted in the corner of the cabin. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, emerged from the shadows, its limbs bent at wrong angles, its head tilted, staring, unblinking. Its skin was pale, grayish, absorbing the light. I froze. My mind screamed at me to run, but my feet were nailed to the floor. The figure moved closer, slow and deliberate, silent as a shadow. I tried to take a photo, but the screen on my camera went blank. Every time I blinked, it vanished, only to appear closer when I looked again. I bolted out the door, nearly tripping on the threshold. The fog had rolled in thick, curling around the cabin like living fingers. The forest had shifted. The trail I had driven in on was gone. Every tree looked twisted, familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Shapes moved just beyond my vision, bending, twisting, disappearing into the mist. I ran blindly. The fog followed me, whispering. Not my name this time, but voices I recognized. Mason, my parents, old friends, coaxing me to step off the path, to enter the mist, to leave everything behind. By the third night, exhaustion and fear had taken over. I'd fallen into streams, crawled over roots, and lost all sense of direction. That's when I found the second cabin, smaller, older, rotting even more. Its door opened onto darkness. Inside, I found a stack of journals. I flipped one open. The handwriting was frantic, jagged. They come with the fog. They remember your face. They learn your voice. Do not linger. Do not answer. Do not follow. Once seen, you belong. I looked up. The tall figure was in the corner again, bending, stretching, tilting its head. I screamed and ran. Branches tore at my clothes. Mud soaked my boots. But I couldn't stop. Every step forward brought me back to the first cabin. The fire in the chimney, the old man's empty rocking chair, the footprints surrounding it. Time had no meaning. Days, nights, they all blended. Hunger gnawed at me. Thirst burned my throat. The whispers never stopped, always calling, always coaxing, always learning. At some point, Mason was gone. I woke in the tent to find it empty, shredded. Footprints led into the fog, none returning. I followed, hoping to find him, only to find a small clearing with a single gravestone. Leaning, weathered, etched clearly with his name, Mason. I ran again, screaming, calling his name. The forest twisted around me, paths looping back impossibly. The figures followed, gliding silently through the fog, bending at impossible angles, watching, learning, mimicking. My own voice echoed back at me, warped, coaxing me to step closer. Finally, I stumbled onto a narrow road, real this time. The fog lifted immediately. The trees returned to normal. The morning sun touched the ridges. My truck was gone. My route home had disappeared. I never returned to the forest. I can't, but I can feel their gaze, patient and unblinking. Shadows move differently in the corner of my vision. Whispers come through the cracks of doors and windows, perfectly mimicking voices I know. My name, my thoughts, my fears. I've learned the rules too late. Do not answer, do not follow, do not linger. Because one day, if I take the wrong turn, if curiosity wins for even a second, I will vanish into those hollers, into the fog, into the watching shadows, and they will remember my face, just as they remembered Mason's. Somewhere in deep Appalachia they wait, patient, hungry, eternal. And when the next fool wanders into the hollers, they will be ready. I didn't mean to get lost in the desert. I thought I knew it. I'd grown up around Arizona, driven through the Mojave more times than I could count, camped under the endless sky, and hiked the canyons near Tucson. The desert had always felt vast but safe, predictable in its dangers. I thought the hardest part was surviving the heat and the dryness. I was wrong. The job seemed simple. A small research company needed someone to check solar-powered weather monitoring stations scattered across a remote stretch of Nevada. They gave me coordinates, a truck, supplies, and a handheld GPS. I was alone, but I liked solitude. I told myself a week in the desert would be peaceful. The first day went as expected. Dirt tracks wound through ridges and dunes. The air shimmered with heat, and the sun burned bright above me. I stopped at each station, logged the readings, and moved on. But even then, the desert felt off. I noticed tracks in the sand that were too long and thin to be human or animal. They trailed to the horizon and vanished as if the desert had swallowed them. I shrugged it off. The desert plays tricks on the mind, I told myself. By the second day, the strangeness increased. The GPS began to glitch. Roads twisted into impossible loops. Ridges I thought I had passed hours ago appeared in the distance, in the wrong place. Sunlight shifted unnaturally, dipping low when it should have been high. And I saw them, the first time clearly. Tall, thin figures standing at the edges of dunes, heads tilted at impossible angles. They didn't move, but I could feel them watching. I tried to drive toward them, and they vanished, reappearing elsewhere. That night, I camped near a rocky outcrop. The desert was quieter than I'd ever known. No wind, no animals, only silence pressing down on me. Around midnight, I woke. Something was circling my tent. The sound was soft, deliberate, scraping across rocks and sand. I gripped my rifle, paralyzed with fear. I unzipped the tent slowly. Nothing. Just sand. Just rocks. But when I examined the area in daylight, the tracks were impossible. Slender, crooked, dragging like something with no joints had walked there. They led up the ridge and disappeared. By the third day, I was disoriented. The desert warped around me. Dunes shifted while I wasn't looking. Rocks seemed to move. Shadows elongated unnaturally. I saw figures more clearly now, pacing at the edges of my vision, tilting their heads. One figure mimicked my movements perfectly. I raised my arm, and it raised its arm. I ducked, and it ducked. I realized then the desert wasn't just watching, it was learning. I tried to ignore it, but the desert wouldn't let me. By the fourth day, I saw signs of other people, faint trails, footprints that twisted and vanished. And then, one of the towers I was supposed to inspect had been tampered with. Equipment stripped, wires cut, and in the sand around it, dozens of strange footprints led off into the distance, disappearing entirely. The desert was not empty. It was active, alive. That night I hid in a small canyon. Figures lined the rim, crawling, pacing, tilting their heads, observing. One figure copied my exact posture, Every breath, every gesture, it mirrored. I understood the truth. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted to replace me, to learn everything it needed to be me. The realization sent a chill down my spine. I was a subject in the desert's patient experiment. By the 5th day, I had run out of water and food. My body was failing. The desert seemed endless, a trap of sand, sun, and shadows. Roads I remembered disappeared, only to reappear miles back where I had started. The figures grew bolder. Shadows moved against logic. I began to hear whispers, not carried on the wind, but inside my mind, repeating words I hadn't spoken. The desert was learning not just my movements, but my thoughts. On the 6th day, desperation drove me forward. I ran blindly across dunes, ignoring pain and thirst. The figures mirrored me, always at a distance, always studying. One crawled along the sand like an insect, its spindly limbs bending at impossible angles. Another stretched impossibly tall, tilting its head, watching. The desert was patient, infinite, and aware. By the 7th day, I collapsed near a dry wash. I was exhausted beyond comprehension, but I saw something. A faint trace of asphalt in the distance, a road, salvation. I crawled toward it, limbs trembling, heat blazing on my skin. The figures stayed behind, pacing along ridges, tilting their heads, waiting. I reached the town on the desert's edge, and people stared as I stumbled into a diner, speaking gibberish about shadows, tracks, and creatures learning me. No one believed me. Perhaps I had gone mad in the heat. But I know the truth. The desert does not forget. Even months later, I see them in reflections, at the edges of my vision, tall, thin, heads tilted, patient, watching, learning, waiting. I know the desert remembers me, and I fear the day it decides it has learned enough. I survived, but I am not safe, and I know one day the desert will come for me again. I realized something was wrong with New York when the maps stopped agreeing with each other. I don't mean metaphorically, I mean actual maps. Google Maps, subway maps, old paper tourist maps stolen from hotel lobbies. They all started contradicting one another in small, specific ways. A street that curved instead of running straight. A park entrance that didn't exist. A subway tunnel that connected to a station I had never heard of. At first, I assumed it was a data issue. New York changes constantly. Buildings rise, businesses die, streets get rerouted. But this was different. This felt intentional. Like the city was being redrawn by someone who only half remembered how it was supposed to look. I noticed it because I deliver packages at night. Overnight courier work is simple. Pick up, drop off, don't ask questions. Offices, private apartments, places people don't want to be seen visiting during the day. I like it because the city is quieter then, more honest. New York at 3 a.m. doesn't pretend to be friendly. One night, I was sent to deliver a package to an address in Lower Manhattan. The address existed. I checked it 3 times, but the street didn't. Where the building should have been, there was a narrow alley I'd never seen before. Too narrow to be legal, squeezed between 2 brick buildings that leaned inward like they were tired of standing. There was no sign, no streetlight, just darkness and the faint smell of damp concrete. My phone buzzed. Delivery status, pending, please proceed. I stepped into the alley. The city noise died instantly like a door shutting behind me. No traffic, no voices. Even my footsteps sounded wrong. Too soft, like the ground was absorbing the sound. Halfway down the alley, I saw a door. It was metal, unmarked, painted the same gray as the surrounding walls. No handle, no keypad, just a rectangular indentation where something might have been removed. I checked the package, no return address, no label except a handwritten note taped to the top. "You're late." The door opened on its own. Inside was a stairwell going down. I didn't go in. I marked the delivery as unable to access and turned around. The alley was gone. Behind me was a brick wall, solid, old, unmoving. I spun in place, panic rising, my breath echoing too loudly in the tight space. The door was still open. I went down the stairs. The stairwell led to a room that looked like a subway station, but wrong. Too clean, too symmetrical. The tiles were white, uncracked, reflecting the overhead lights perfectly. No trash, no graffiti, no ads. At the center of the room was a long table. On it were maps, hundreds of them. Some were ancient, hand-drawn, yellowed with age. Others were modern, laminated digital printouts. They all showed New York, but every single one was slightly different. Streets missing, buildings misplaced, rivers bending where they shouldn't. And some maps had sections scratched out violently, like someone had tried to erase a mistake by force. A man sat at the far end of the table. He wore a city maintenance uniform, orange vest, reflective stripes, but his face was blurred, not out of focus, but unfinished, like a face that hadn't fully rendered yet. "You weren't supposed to find this," he said calmly. I dropped the package. "What is this place?" I asked. He sighed. "A correction site." The lights flickered. He gestured to the maps. "New York isn't stable. It never has been. Too many people, too much history layered on top of itself. Mistakes accumulate." "Mistakes like what?" He looked at me then. "Like you." I ran. I don't remember leaving the room or climbing the stairs. I only remember bursting out onto a street that almost made sense. Familiar buildings were there, but some were mirrored, some were too tall. Some leaned at impossible angles, like they'd been copied incorrectly. People walked past me, but none of them blinked, not once. I got home somehow. I locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and didn't sleep. At dawn, I checked my phone. No record of the delivery, no address, no missing time. I tried to convince myself it was stress, hallucination, a dream layered over exhaustion. But the maps kept changing. My usual routes began taking longer. Streets doubled back on themselves. Subway trains skipped stations that clearly existed. Announcements named stops I'd never heard of. One night, I watched a building across the street from my apartment move. Not collapse, not shift suddenly. It slid. Slowly, subtly, like someone adjusting a piece on a game board. When it stopped, the fire escape no longer lined up with the windows. The building looked embarrassed, like it knew it was wrong. I started seeing the maintenance workers everywhere. Orange vests, blank faces, standing at corners, staring at nothing. Sometimes holding tools that didn't look like tools, long, thin objects that hummed faintly, bending the air around them. Every time I tried to photograph them, my phone glitched. The images came out as maps. Then the notes started appearing in my apartment, on the mirror, misplaced, on my door, error confirmed, on my bed written into the dust, "Do not move." At night I heard footsteps outside my apartment, measured, coordinated. Sometimes the sound of paper sliding, like maps being unfolded. I stopped leaving. On the seventh night, the wall in my living room peeled back like wet wallpaper, revealing the same stairwell from the alley. The man from the table stood there. "You're destabilizing your surroundings," he said gently. "The longer you stay uncorrected, the worse it gets." "What does that mean?" I asked. He stepped aside, letting me see past him. Beyond the stairwell was a vast space, bigger than any underground structure should be. Rows and rows of New York models stretched into darkness, physical models, miniature buildings, streets, bridges. Some were pristine, others were broken, burned, flooded, twisted into unrecognizable shapes. "You're from a version that no longer aligns," he continued, "a rounding error, a leftover. You're saying I don't belong here." "You belong," he said, "just not here." He handed me a map. It showed New York, but without me. My apartment building wasn't there. My street ended abruptly. Even the routes I used nightly simply stopped. "What happens if I don't go?" I asked. The lights dimmed. "Then the city compensates." The ground shook slightly, like distant thunder. "People disappear. Blocks get rewritten. Eventually something bigger breaks." I thought about the alley, the station, the blinkingless people. "How do I go back?" I asked. He smiled, not kindly. "There is no back, only removal." The stairwell began to close. I ran. I don't know how long I ran. Streets folded, neighborhoods repeated. I saw the same bodega 3 times in different boroughs. I crossed a bridge that shouldn't exist, over water that reflected the wrong sky. The city was unraveling around me. Buildings flickered between versions. Street signs changed languages mid-sentence. People froze in place, their outlines blurring, like sketches being erased. I made it to Central Park, or something pretending to be it. The trees were wrong, too symmetrical, repeating patterns like copied textures. The paths formed perfect grids instead of curves. At the center of the park was a hole, not a crater, an absence, a perfectly shaped void in the ground, edges too clean, too intentional. Around it stood the maintenance workers, waiting. I understood then. New York wasn't failing, it was cleaning. I stepped back. The ground shifted beneath me, pulling inward. The air buzzed with that low humming sound. I felt myself losing weight, substance, like a bad memory fading. As I fell, I saw the city above me stabilize. Buildings snapped into place, streets realigned, people blinked again. The last thing I saw was a maintenance worker unfolding a new map. This one was clean. Correct. Without me. I never thought I'd spend New Year's Eve alone. But after the breakup, after the friends who suddenly had plans, I found myself walking the icy streets toward a tiny apartment I had rented just for the night. My plan was simple. Hot chocolate, a cheap horror movie marathon, and sleep before the year turned. Nothing fancy, nothing social. Safe. The apartment was small, on the top floor of a building that groaned under the winter wind. The windows were frosted over, making the outside world a blurry smear of city lights. I set my bag down, lit a single lamp, and unpacked the snacks I had brought. By 10 o'clock, I was curled up on the couch, the TV flickering. Outside, the distant hum of celebrations rolled faintly against the walls. I was alone, perfectly alone. Then came the sound. It was soft, almost polite at first. A knock. I froze. The building was mostly empty, and I hadn't expected anyone. I peeked through the peephole, empty hallway. The light above the door flickered. I laughed nervously. Probably just the wind, I muttered, but a strange shiver ran down my spine. 10 minutes later, the knock came again. Louder this time, more deliberate, and I heard it, the faintest whisper, almost drowned by my own heartbeat. Let me in. I told myself I was imagining it. I tried to focus on the movie, but the screen seemed darker than usual. Shadows pooled unnaturally in the corners of the room. I could feel them moving, stretching, as if alive. By 11:30, I was pacing. Every sound made me jump. The radiator hissed, a pipe creaked, the wind rattled a window. And yet, the sense of being watched was undeniable. Something in the apartment wasn't mine. I sat back down, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was too much coffee. But when I glanced at the mirror by the doorway, my reflection moved before I did. A smirk I didn't make, eyes darker, deeper, mocking me. 11:45, 15 minutes to midnight. I tried to calm myself, to ignore the unease, but the knocking returned. This time, faster, louder, insistent. Panic clawed at me. I backed into the corner, glancing around the apartment for anything I could use as a weapon. Then, the whispering became clearer, louder. It's your turn. Midnight belongs to me. My breath caught in my throat. The shadows shifted again, coiling along the walls, the ceiling pooling around my feet. And then, for a brief instant, I saw him. Or it. A figure at the far corner of the room. Tall, impossibly thin, all black, featureless except for eyes. So many eyes, blinking in patterns that didn't make sense. Its gaze fixed on me, patient, calculating. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. My hands shook violently. My voice caught in my throat. It moved, not walking, but sliding across the room with unnatural grace, every blink of its countless eyes sending a jolt of fear into my chest. 11:59. 1 minute left. I could feel the seconds dragging, each one heavy, thick, suffocating. I grabbed my phone, desperate for help. No signal, screen black, dead. The fireworks outside began. Brief flashes of light illuminated the room for fractions of a second. In each flash, I saw the figure closer, shadows stretched unnaturally, and the reflection in the mirror grinning, leering. The countdown on TV reached 10 seconds. I pressed my palms over my ears, closed my eyes, tried to wish the moment away. 7, 6, 5. The lights flickered violently. My apartment twisted. The furniture elongated, walls bent, the ceiling sagged. I screamed, but my voice didn't sound right. It was layered, distorted, echoing in a way that wasn't possible. 3, 2, 1, midnight. The lights went out completely. Total darkness. I could feel it then, surrounding me, pressing into my mind. The figure was everywhere. Its eyes, its presence, its whispers. They filled every corner of my consciousness. I tried to move. I tried to fight. My hands flailed. My legs buckled. Time fractured. I saw myself in the past, previous New Year's Eves, moments of joy, regret, mistakes, fleeting happiness. Every memory looped and twisted, distorted by something cruel, mocking. Each reflection stared back at me with eyes I didn't recognize. My own, but wrong, hollow, terrified. I screamed. My voice finally emerged, but it wasn't mine. Someone, or something, twisted it into a grotesque mockery. The shadows writhed, grew taller, reaching for me. The air tasted of ash and frost. Then, for a heartbeat, silence. I opened my eyes. My apartment was normal, or appeared normal. The lamp shone, the snow outside glistened, the TV displayed static. Relief surged. Maybe it was over. Maybe I had passed the moment unscathed. But then the knock came again, soft, polite, deliberate, and the whisper, "Next year starts now." I knew in that instant, with bone-deep certainty, that I had not survived. Midnight had not passed. It had claimed me, trapping me in the hours between years, watched by a being older than time itself. And every time I think the new year has begun, it hasn't. It's still counting down. Forever. I had been alone in the house before, plenty of times. An afternoon here, a quiet evening there. I thought I understood what loneliness felt like inside these walls. I didn't understand anything. The night my parents left, it was raining lightly. Not a storm, just enough to blur the streetlights and make the windows reflect more than they showed. I stood at the front door, watching their car pull away, the tires hissing against the wet road. My mother waved. I waved back. Then the car turned the corner, and the house exhaled. I felt it more than I heard it, a subtle shift in pressure, like stepping underwater. I locked the door, slid the deadbolt, then stood there longer than necessary with my hand still on the metal. "You're fine," I told myself. The words sounded wrong in the empty hallway. The house was quiet, but not peacefully so. It wasn't silent either. There were small sounds, pipes clicking, the refrigerator humming, the soft tick of the clock above the stairs. Together they formed a kind of rhythm, uneven and irregular, like a heartbeat that couldn't settle. I went room to room, turning on lights. The glow made me feel safer, even though it also created long shadows that stretched in ways I didn't like. When every room was lit, I stood in the middle of the living room and listened. Nothing unusual. I made dinner, ate too fast, left the TV on for company. Every laugh track felt invasive, like strangers mocking me from behind the walls. Around 11, I heard the first thing that didn't belong. It was subtle, a soft sound from upstairs, not a creak, not a footstep, a shift, like someone adjusting their weight on a bed. I muted the TV. The sound didn't repeat. I waited a full minute before laughing nervously and blaming the house. Old wood, temperature change, normal explanations. Still, I didn't go upstairs right away. When I finally did, I paused at the bottom of the stairs. The hallway light was on, spilling yellow light over the landing. My bedroom door was open, exactly as I'd left it. Nothing was out of place. I brushed my teeth, changed clothes, and got into bed. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside unnaturally quiet. No cars, no wind, just the house and me. Sleep didn't come easily. I kept listening. Somewhere after midnight, I heard my name. It was faint, almost gentle. I sat up so fast my neck hurt. "Hello?" I whispered. Silence. I told myself it had been part of a dream. Hypnagogic hallucination. I'd read about those. Your brain filling in gaps as you drift between states. I lay back down, then I heard it again. Clearer this time. "Hey." It came from the hallway. I stared at my door. "Who's there?" I asked. The words felt stupid the moment they left my mouth. No answer. I lay frozen, staring at the sliver of light beneath the door. It flickered, as if someone had passed in front of it. My heart slammed against my ribs. I reached for my phone and texted my parents. Me. "Did you forget something?" The message sent. No reply. Another sound followed, soft footsteps on the carpet, slow, barely audible. They stopped right outside my door. I could hear breathing, not heavy, not rushed, patient. The handle turned, just enough to test it. Locked. The breathing stopped. I held my breath, afraid even the sound of air leaving my lungs would give me away. Footsteps retreated. I stayed awake the rest of the night, staring at the door, waiting for it to open. It didn't. The next day, everything felt wrong in a quieter way. The house smelled different, damp, stale, like it hadn't been opened in years, even though windows were cracked and doors unlocked. I walked through the rooms, checking corners, closets, behind curtains. Nothing. I told myself fear was contagious. One bad night didn't mean anything. That afternoon, I found something odd in the kitchen. A cup in the sink. I hadn't used it. It was clean, still faintly warm. I stared at it longer than I should have, then rinsed it and put it away. My hands shook. That evening, I locked myself in my room before sunset. I didn't turn the hallway light on this time. I didn't want to see shadows moving where they shouldn't. I lay in bed scrolling endlessly, eyes burning, brain refusing to shut down. Sometime after 2 a.m., the house made a new sound, a door opening, slow, careful, from downstairs. Then another sound followed, someone walking, not wandering, not searching, walking with purpose. Each step moved closer to the stairs. I sat up, clutching my phone. The steps climbed. 1, 2, 3. They paused halfway. I could almost picture it, whatever it was, standing there, listening, learning the house the way I had my entire life. Then it continued. The steps stopped at the top. The hallway floor creaked. The sound moved toward my room. The door handle turned, locked. A pause, then a knock. Soft, almost polite. "Why are you hiding?" a voice asked. It was familiar. Too familiar. It sounded like me. "I live here," it continued. "Don't you remember?" I screamed. The knocking stopped. Footsteps retreated, faster this time. I didn't chase. I didn't move. I sat there until dawn, shaking. On the third night, the power went out. No storm, no warning, just darkness. The house felt enormous in the dark, like the walls had pulled back to make room for something else. My phone's flashlight cut weakly through the black, catching corners that didn't look right, angles slightly off, shadows deeper than they should be. I heard whispers, not words at first, just murmurs layered over each other, coming from inside the walls. I pressed my hands over my ears. They didn't stop. "They left you," one voice said. "They always do," said another. I backed into my room and slammed the door. The whispers followed, from the closet, from under the bed, from the ceiling. My phone buzzed. A message appeared, from my own number. "You talk to yourself when you're scared." I dropped the phone. The bed creaked as weight pressed into it beside me. Something lay down. I couldn't see it. I could feel it. The mattress dipped. The sheets tightened. A breath brushed my ear. "You gave me a name," it whispered. "I learned it." I screamed until my throat burned. They found me in the morning, curled in the corner of my room, nails bleeding where I dug them into the floorboards. They said I'd had a breakdown. They said the house was empty. They said there were no signs of anyone else. They moved me out 2 weeks later. I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in a new place, I hear it. Soft, patient, calling my name, and I know I taught it how to sound human. I've been driving trucks for nearly 20 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. Torn up roads, endless storms, near misses with deer and drunk drivers, even the occasional weird hitchhiker. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened on that night. That night on Route 213, a road I'd traveled dozens of times, became a nightmare I still can't escape. It started like any other late-night run. I was hauling a refrigerated shipment from Michigan to Idaho, a long, lonely stretch of interstate through forests, rivers, and small towns that never seemed to end. The call came in late, voice sharp and tense. "Pickups at the old Clayton lot, mile marker 112, midnight sharp, priority shipment," the dispatcher said. There was a pause, a whisper I thought I imagined. "Be careful, all right?" I shrugged it off. I've been on the road long enough to know that dispatchers sometimes get jittery. Midnight was fine. I liked the quiet, the hum of the engine, the solitude. By the time I arrived, the lot was empty, gray under a half moon that barely peeked through clouds. The warehouse was ancient, its windows broken, steel doors rusted shut. Gravel crunched under my boots as I approached the trailer. One lone refrigerated unit waited. Cold metal, faint frost forming along the edges. No one was around. No lights except a flickering bulb above the door, swaying in the wind. Inside, a single crate sat. Heavy. Wooden. No markings, nothing to indicate what it contained. Odd, I thought, since the paperwork mentioned a full shipment of similar crates. I leaned closer and noticed scratch marks along the edges, fresh and shallow. I shook my head. Rats, maybe. But then, faintly, I heard something else. A scratching, soft, deliberate, coming from inside the crate. I froze. My hands gripped the crate handle. Nothing made sense. The sound didn't match anything I knew. It was alive. Something inside was moving. Something was trying to get out. "Just your imagination," I muttered, though my voice sounded hollow in the empty lot. I hooked the trailer to my truck, climbed in, and started down the highway. The engine hummed, warmth spilling from the vents. The road was empty. Too empty. No other vehicles, no distant lights, just the faint rustle of wind. I glanced at the GPS. It had gone haywire, showing a twisting route that didn't match the road. I ignored it. Fatigue can make anyone paranoid. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time became meaningless. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft and chilling, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Drive. Don't stop." I slammed my hand on the horn. Silence. My eyes darted to the mirrors. Nothing. Just the crate in the trailer, cold metal and wood. The fog rolled in suddenly, thick and viscous, curling around the tires like smoke. Shadows appeared at the edges of the headlights. At first, I thought they were trees. Then, I saw them move. Figures, humanoid but wrong, limbed in ways that no human should be limbed. Faces featureless, pale, moving in rhythm with the truck, keeping pace. My pulse hammered. The crate rattled violently in the back. My stomach lurched. Something inside was alive, clawing, pounding at the walls. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. "Drive, or we take you." The whisper grew louder, echoing inside the cab and inside my skull. The road itself seemed to bend, twist, impossible curves forming in the fog. Mile markers disappeared. Signs were blank, replaced with symbols that made my skin crawl. Snow began falling, thick and wet, though the forecast hadn't predicted a storm. Figures darted across the road. I swerved to avoid them, tires screaming on slick asphalt. The crate slammed again, bouncing from side to side. My hands shook uncontrollably. I was trapped, a prisoner of some impossible force I couldn't name. Hours or minutes later, a faint light appeared ahead. A gas station? Impossible. I had been on this stretch for eternity. The shadows seemed to vanish as I approached, slipping away like smoke. Relief washed over me, but it was brief. I pulled into the lot, heart racing, body trembling. The crate was gone. Just an empty trailer. No scratches, no traces, nothing. I stepped out, hoping for some explanation. There was none. The clerk looked at me as though I'd lost my mind. "No deliveries came through here tonight," he said. "Everything looks normal." I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, hallucination, a combination of fatigue and road monotony. But deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever was in that crate hadn't left me. It was still out there, watching, waiting. Since that night, I've never driven alone after midnight. Every foggy mile, every empty stretch of highway brings a shiver. The whisper follows me. I hear it in my dreams faintly, urging me to drive. And I know, one day if I ever stop, it will catch me. I keep moving, always moving. Because the last thing that whisper said before vanishing forever was the truth I can't escape. Drive, or we will come for you. Even now when I'm alone, headlights cutting through the fog, I can feel it. Waiting, always behind, always near. And I know that no matter how far I drive, some roads never end. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next story.